Clara's knees hit the frozen ground. The flour sack split open, white powder mixing with white snow, and her youngest screamed against her chest. 6 children. 6 hungry mouths. And not a soul in this God-forsaken territory who'd lift a finger for a widow. She didn't cry. She'd forgotten how. Then she heard it, horse hooves, slow and steady coming up the ridge. A man's voice, rough but gentle. "Ma'am, you ain't got to fall alone." If this story touches your heart, subscribe and follow Clara's journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Clara Whitmore's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She gripped the flour sack tighter, her knuckles white as the snow beneath her boots. Thomas walked ahead, his 12-year-old shoulders squared like a man's, carrying his baby sister wrapped in a threadbare quilt. Behind him, Mary Ellen coughed, that wet, rattling sound that hadn't stopped for 3 days now. "Mama," the twins whimpered in unison. "Mama, we're cold." "I know," Clara said. "Keep walking." But her legs betrayed her. One step, then another, then her boot caught on something buried in the snow, and she went down hard. The flour sack split. White powder exploded across the frozen ground. The baby screamed. Clara didn't move. She stayed there on her hands and knees watching the flour, the last of their food, disappear into the snow, like it had never existed at all. "Mama!" Thomas dropped his bundle and ran back. "Mama, get up." "I'm trying," she whispered. But her arms wouldn't hold her weight. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since Jacob died. 3 weeks since she'd dragged his body behind the smokehouse and wrapped it in canvas because the ground was too frozen to dig. 3 weeks of watching her children starve while the town of Bitter Creek turned its back on her. "Mama, please." Thomas grabbed her arm. "Someone's coming." She heard it then, horse hooves slow and deliberate crunching through the frost. Clara forced herself upright, shielding the baby against her chest. The rider stopped at the top of the ridge. He sat tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the wind. His coat was worn but clean, his beard trimmed close. He didn't move, just watched her with eyes she couldn't read from this distance. Another stranger come to gawk, she thought. Come to count her children and shake his head and ride on. "Thomas," she said quietly, "take your sisters behind me." "But Mama—" "Now." The boy obeyed. Clara straightened her spine, ignoring the crack of her joints, the ache in her bones. She'd learned long ago that predators could smell weakness. The man dismounted. He moved slow, deliberate, like a man approaching a wounded animal. His boots crunched through the snow step by careful step until he stood just 10 feet away. He removed his hat. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was low, rough at the edges. "Name's Samuel Thornton. I got a ranch about 8 miles north of here." Clara said nothing. He looked at the ruined flour sack, then at the children huddled behind her. His jaw tightened. "How long since y'all ate—" "That ain't your concern," Clara said. "Reckon it is now." He took another step forward. Clara's hand moved instinctively to her hip to the knife she kept hidden in her skirt. Samuel stopped. He raised both hands, palms out. "I ain't here to hurt you, ma'am. I ain't here to take nothing." He swallowed hard. I seen you walking from town. Seen those folks turn you away at the general store." Clara's throat tightened. "You saw that." "I saw everything." His voice dropped. "Saw that man spit at your feet. Saw them women pull their children away like yours carried plague." The baby whimpered against Clara's chest. She bounced him gently, automatically. "What do you want?" she asked. Samuel Thornton looked at her. Really looked the way no one had in months. His eyes moved over her cracked hands, her hollow cheeks, the blood-stained hem of her dress that she'd never quite managed to wash clean. "I want to help," he said simply. Clara laughed. It came out harsh, broken. "Help," she repeated. "Mister, I've heard that word from a dozen men since my husband died. Every one of them wanted something in return. I don't want nothing. Everybody wants something. Samuel nodded slowly, like she'd said something wise. You're right, he admitted. Everybody does. He paused. I want to sleep at night without seeing hungry children in my dreams. I want to face my maker someday, knowing I didn't ride past a woman in need. That's what I want. The wind picked up. Mary Ellen coughed again, a sound that shook her whole small body. Clara felt Thomas press closer behind her. Mama, he whispered. Mary Ellen's getting worse. Clara closed her eyes. She thought of the cabin 8 miles back, the cabin with no food, no firewood, no hope. She thought of her father-in-law's letter, the one that had arrived 2 days ago. I'm coming for what's mine. Those children belong with family. You got nothing to offer them but suffering. She thought of dying alone in the snow while her children watched. You got a wagon? She asked finally. Samuel's shoulders relaxed just slightly. I do. You got food? Enough. You got room for 6 children who ain't yours and a woman who can't pay you a single cent. Samuel Thornton looked at her with something in his eyes she couldn't name. I got room, he said quietly. And I ain't asking for payment. Clara stared at him for a long moment. The wind howled, the baby cried. Her legs trembled beneath her. Why? She asked. Why us? You don't know us. You don't owe us nothing. Samuel's jaw worked. He looked away toward the horizon, toward something she couldn't see. Lost my wife and daughter 4 years back, he said. Scarlet fever took them both in the same week. I wasn't there when it happened. Was up in the mountains thinking I was building something that mattered. He paused. By the time I got home, they were already in the ground. Clara felt something shift in her chest. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. I ain't telling you for sympathy. Samuel's voice hardened. I'm telling you because I know what it looks like when someone's carrying more than they can hold, and I know what happens when nobody stops to help. He stepped forward again, close enough now that she could see the gray in his beard, the lines around his eyes. Come with me, he said. Please. Clara's throat burned. She looked back at her children. Thomas trying so hard to be brave. Mary Ellen shivering with fever. The twins clinging to each other with bare feet wrapped in rags. Little Sarah, only 4, who hadn't spoken a word since her father died. And the baby. The baby who would die before morning if she didn't find shelter. We ain't charity, Clara said. I work. I cook. I clean. I don't take nothing I ain't earned. Wouldn't expect any different. And if you lay a hand on me or my children, then you put that knife you're hiding straight through my heart, Samuel said evenly. And I won't blame you for it. Clara blinked. He'd noticed the knife. For the first time in 3 weeks, something almost like a smile tugged at her lips. You always this direct? She asked. Only with folks worth being honest with. The wind died down. The snow fell softer now, gentler. Clara looked at Samuel Thornton, this stranger with his worn coat and steady hands and grief-heavy eyes, and made a decision. Go get your wagon, she said. Samuel nodded once. Stay here. Build a fire if you can. I'll be back before dark. He turned toward his horse, then stopped, looked back at her. You got a name, ma'am? Clara, she said. Clara Whitmore. Clara. He said it like he was committing it to memory. That's a good name. Then he mounted his horse and rode north without another word. Thomas helped her gather the children into a tight circle behind a fallen cottonwood. Clara found enough dry branches to start a small fire, barely enough to warm their hands, but better than nothing. Mama, Thomas said quietly. Do you trust him? Clara poked at the flames. No, she admitted. I don't trust anybody anymore. Then why'd you say yes? She looked at her son, this boy, who'd grown up too fast, who'd helped her drag his father's body through the snow, who'd held his siblings while she screamed into her pillow at night. Because sometimes, she said, you got to choose between a risk and a certainty, and the certainty right now is death. Thomas nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He understood. What about grandfather? He asked. His letter said. I know what his letter said. Clara's voice went hard. But Cornelius Whitmore don't get to decide what happens to my children. Not while I'm still breathing. He's a judge, Mama. He's got power. He's got money and meanness. Clara looked her son in the eye. That ain't the same as power. Real power is what's inside you, the kind that don't bend, don't break, don't bow to men who think they own the world. Mary Ellen coughed again, and Clara pulled the girl close, tucking her under her arm. You got that power, Thomas. So do your sisters, and so do I. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then, do you think Pa would have liked him? The stranger. Clara thought about her husband. Jacob Whitmore had been a hard man, not cruel, but carved from stone. He'd worked himself to death trying to prove something to his father, trying to be worthy of a name that had never really belonged to him. I think your Pa would have wanted us to survive, she said finally, whatever it took. The fire crackled. The twins fell asleep against each other. Little Sarah stared into the flames with empty eyes. Clara held her children close and waited for a stranger to return. The wagon came just as the sun bled its last light across the horizon. Samuel Thornton drove it slow, careful the horses picking their way through the deepening snow. He'd brought blankets, thick wool ones that looked new, and an iron pot of something that smelled like heaven. Venison stew, he said, climbing down. Made it yesterday. Should still be warm enough. Clara's children descended on the food like wolves. Even little Sarah ate her small hands clutching the tin cup Samuel gave her. For the first time in days, the sound of eating replaced the sound of crying. Clara didn't eat. She stood apart watching Samuel unload supplies from the wagon. More blankets, a sack of cornmeal dried apples, salt pork. This is too much, she said. Samuel didn't stop working. It ain't enough, actually, but it's what I got. I told you I don't take charity. And I told you this ain't charity. He straightened, met her eyes. This is one human being helping another, the way it ought to be, the way it used to be before folks forgot what mattered. Clara felt her defenses waver. You don't know me, she said. You don't know what I've done, what I'm capable of. Samuel's expression didn't change. I know you carried 6 children through a blizzard with nothing but a sack of flour and your own 2 hands, he said. I know you stood up to a whole town that wanted you gone. I know you're still standing even though everything in this world has tried to knock you down. He stepped closer. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Clara's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. My father-in-law is coming, she said. Judge Cornelius Whitmore. He's powerful, connected. He wants my children, says I'm unfit to raise them. Says a widow with no means has no business. He can say whatever he wants. Samuel's voice went cold in a way it hadn't before. Words don't mean nothing when you got good people standing behind you. I don't have good people. I don't have anybody. You got me now. Clara stared at him. Why? She asked again the same question as before, but different now, deeper. You could have any woman in the territory, young, pretty, without 6 children, and a dead husband, and an enemy bearing down on her. Why choose this? Why choose us? Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Behind them the children laughed, actually laughed at something Thomas had said. The sound was foreign, beautiful. Because I've been where you are, Samuel said finally. Standing in the ruins of everything I thought my life would be, wondering if there was any point in going on. He swallowed. Somebody helped me once when I had nothing. A stranger who didn't owe me a damn thing. He said something I ain't never forgot. What? He said the measure of a man ain't what he builds for himself. It's what he builds for others. Samuel looked toward the children. I ain't built nothing worthwhile in 4 years. Maybe this is my chance to start. Clara felt something crack inside her. Something she'd been holding together with nothing but will and spite. A sound escaped her throat, half sob, half laugh. Samuel didn't move to comfort her, didn't try to touch her. He just stood there, steady as bedrock, while she pulled herself back together. We should go, she said finally, before the snow gets worse. Samuel nodded. He helped her load the children into the wagon, Thomas. In front, the girls wrapped in blankets, in the back, the baby secured in a makeshift cradle between sacks of grain. Clara climbed up onto the bench seat. Samuel settled beside her, taking the reins. It's 8 miles, he said. Might be rough going in places. You tell me if you need to stop. I won't need to stop. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. No, he said. I don't reckon you will. They traveled in silence for the first mile. The only sounds were the creak of wagon wheels, the soft breathing of sleeping children, and the whisper of snow falling all around them. Clara kept her eyes forward. Her hands stayed folded in her lap, but her knife was still within reach. She wasn't stupid. She wasn't naive. But something about Samuel Thornton made her want to believe, and that scared her more than anything. Your husband, Samuel said finally. How'd he die? Clara's jaw tightened. Does it matter? Only if you want to tell me. She was quiet for a long time. The horses plodded forward. The night deepened. He fell, she said finally. From the barn rafters. Hit his head on the way down. Samuel didn't ask if it was an accident. Clara was grateful for that. We'd been fighting that morning. She continued, the words coming easier now. About his father, about money, about everything. She paused. I said things I shouldn't have. He went up to fix the roof and I didn't go with him. Didn't even watch. That ain't your fault. Feels like it is. Feelings lie. Samuel's voice was gentle but firm. I know that better than most. Spent 3 years blaming myself for a fever I couldn't have stopped if I'd been standing right there. Clara looked at him. Does it ever get better? She asked. The guilt? No, he admitted. But it gets quieter, and eventually you learn to live with the noise. Mary Ellen coughed in the wagon bed. Clara turned instinctively, checking on her daughter. She needs medicine, Samuel said. I got some at the cabin. Not much, but it might help. You keep medicine. I keep a lot of things. He shrugged. Never know when you might need them. They fell silent again. The miles passed slowly, marked by nothing but the steady rhythm of hooves and the distant howl of wind across the plains. Finally, Clara spoke. My father-in-law, she said. He ain't just a judge. He's... She searched for the right words. He's the kind of man who breaks things just to prove he can. People, laws, promises don't matter to him. All that matters is winning. And he wants your children. He wants Jacob's children, his bloodline, his legacy. Clara's voice turned bitter. He never cared about them when Jacob was alive. Never visited, never wrote, never sent a single cent to help us through hard winters. But now that Jacob's gone, suddenly those children are precious to him. Samuel's hands tightened on the reins. What about you? What happens to you if he takes them? Clara laughed, that same broken sound from before. I don't matter to him. I'm just the woman who married his son and failed to keep him alive. He'll toss me aside like a worn-out saddle and forget I ever existed. That ain't going to happen. You don't know that. I know this. Samuel turned to look at her, his eyes fierce in the darkness. As long as I'm breathing, nobody takes anything from you. Not your children, not your dignity, not your right to live free. Clara felt her breath catch. You don't owe me that, she whispered. I ain't talking about owing. Samuel turned back to the road. I'm talking about what's right. And what's right is a mother staying with her children. What's right is a woman being treated with respect. What's right is standing up to men who think they can take whatever they want just because they got power and money. The wind picked up. Snow swirled around them thick and fast. "We're close," Samuel said. "Another mile, maybe less." Clara nodded. She didn't speak. Couldn't speak. Something had shifted inside her, some wall she'd built to protect herself from hope. It hadn't fallen, not yet, but there were cracks now, tiny fractures that let the light through. She looked at Samuel Thornton, this stranger with his worn coat and steady hands, and thought, maybe there are still good men in this world. And for the first time since Jacob died, she allowed herself to imagine a future that didn't end in darkness. The cabin appeared through the snow like a ghost, a squat, solid shape against the hillside, with smoke curling from the chimney and a lantern burning in the window. Clara blinked. "You left a light on," she said. "Always do." Samuel guided the horses toward the barn. "Helps me find my way home." Home. The word felt strange in Clara's mouth. She hadn't had a home in so long, just places to survive, places to suffer, places to wait for the next disaster. "It ain't much," Samuel said, as if reading her thoughts. "2 rooms, a loft for storage. Well's good, though, and the stove works." "It's perfect," Clara heard herself say. Samuel looked at her surprised. "You ain't even seen the inside yet." "Don't need to." She gestured toward the cabin, the barn, the fields beyond. "This is a place where someone cares. I can tell by the way it's kept, the way you talk about it." She paused. "I ain't had that in a long time." Something softened in Samuel's face. "Come on," he said quietly. "Let's get your young'uns inside." The next hour was a blur of activity. Samuel carried the sleeping children in one by one, laying them on beds piled with quilts. Clara stoked the fire, warmed the stew, peeled off wet boots and frozen socks. Thomas helped without being asked. Hauling wood, filling the water basin, checking on his sisters. He moved like a boy, used to working, used to being needed, used to carrying weight that should never have been his. Samuel watched him with quiet approval. "Your boy's got good instincts," he said to Clara. "He's had to grow up fast." "I can see that." Samuel handed Thomas a bowl of stew. "You did good today, son, getting your family here safe." Thomas looked up startled. It had been a long time since a man had spoken to him with respect. "Thank you, sir." "Don't call me sir. Makes me feel old." A hint of a smile. "Sam's fine." Thomas nodded. Something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition, the beginning of trust. Clara watched from across the room, her heart aching in ways she didn't know how to name. Later, when the children were fed and sleeping, Clara sat by the fire with a cup of bitter coffee warming her hands. Samuel sat across from her, whittling a piece of wood into something she couldn't quite recognize. "You can have the bed," he said. "I'll take the floor." "I ain't kicking you out of your own bed." "You ain't kicking me anywhere. I'm choosing." He looked up. "You've been sleeping rough for weeks. You need rest. Real rest." Clara wanted to argue. Her pride demanded it. But she was so tired. God, she was so tired. "One night," she said finally. "Then we figure out something proper." Samuel nodded. "One night." The fire crackled. Outside the wind howled, but inside the cabin was warm, safe, solid. Clara looked at this stranger who had given her more kindness in one day than she'd received in years. "Thank you," she said. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Samuel's hand stilled on the wood. "Don't thank me yet," he said quietly. "The hard part ain't over. Your father-in-law, the town, the winter, we got a lot of fights ahead." "I know, but we'll face them together." He met her eyes. That's what I'm offering Clara. Not just a roof. Not just food. A partner. Someone to stand with you when the storm comes. Clara's throat tightened. Why would you do that? You barely know me. Samuel set down his knife. Because I've been alone for 4 years, he said. And I'm tired of it. Because I saw you out there in the snow carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, and something in me woke up. Something I thought was dead. He leaned forward. I ain't asking for nothing, Clara. Not your heart, not your hand. Just the chance to prove I'm worth trusting. The chance to show you that not every man is out to take what he can and leave you with the pieces. Clara felt the tears finally fall hot and silent down her cheeks. I'm broken, she whispered. I've got nothing to give. You got yourself, Samuel said. And that's more than enough. The fire burned low. The children slept. The snow fell soft and endless outside, and Clara Whitmore, for the first time in longer than she could remember, allowed herself to rest. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of children laughing. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling above her was solid, not patched with canvas and prayer. The blankets around her were thick and warm. And the laughter. When had she last heard her children laugh like that? She sat up slowly, her body aching from weeks of exhaustion, finally catching up with her. Through the small window, she could see gray morning light filtering through the snow. And there, in front of the cabin, Thomas was helping Samuel feed the horses, while the twins threw snowballs at each other. Mama's awake! Little Sarah stood in the doorway, her eyes brighter than Clara had seen them in months. Behind her, Mary Ellen sat wrapped in quilts by the fire, a steaming cup in her hands. How do you feel, baby? Clara asked, crossing to her daughter. She pressed her palm to Mary Ellen's forehead. Still warm, but not burning like before. Mr. Sam gave me medicine, Mary Ellen said. It tastes awful, but he said it would help. Did he now? Clara looked toward the door. Samuel Thornton stood on the threshold, snow dusting his shoulders, his breath fogging in the cold air. She needed willow bark tea, he said. Had some dried from last spring. Should help with the fever. Clara nodded slowly. Thank you. No need. Samuel stomped the snow from his boots. Your boy's a hard worker. Helped me feed the stock and muck out the barn before I even asked. Thomas has always been responsible. More than responsible. Samuel hung his coat by the door. He's got the makings of a good man. You should be proud. Clara felt something tighten in her chest. Pride. When had she last felt proud of anything except simple survival? There's oatmeal on the stove, Samuel said. Ain't fancy, but it's hot. The young'uns already ate, but I figured you'd want to sleep. You should have woken me. I told you I'd work for my keep. And you will. Samuel pulled a chair close to the fire. But you ain't no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Today you rest. Tomorrow we figure out the rest. Clara wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed at her to prove her worth, to demonstrate that she wasn't a burden. But Samuel's eyes held no judgment, no expectation, just calm certainty. She sat down across from him and accepted the bowl of oatmeal he offered. Your cabin is well kept, she said between bites. Better than most bachelor ranches I've seen. Had to learn. After Emily died, I let everything go to hell for about a year. The ranch myself, everything. Samuel stared into the fire. Then one morning I woke up and realized I was just waiting to die. And that seemed like a waste of the life she'd loved. Clara paused her spoon halfway to her mouth. Emily. That was your wife's name. Emily Rose Thornton. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She was from Virginia originally. Had this laugh that could fill a whole room. Used to say I was the most stubborn man she'd ever met, and she'd met plenty. She sounds wonderful. She was. Samuel's voice dropped. And our daughter Lily. She was 3 when the fever took her. Had her mama's eyes and her daddy's temper. Clara set down her bowl. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked. You didn't ask. I offered. Samuel looked at her. Figured if we're going to be living under the same roof, we ought to know each other's ghosts. The fire crackled. Outside, the children's laughter drifted through the walls like music. Jacob wasn't a bad man, Clara said quietly. That's what I keep telling myself. He wasn't cruel, wasn't violent. He just couldn't be what I needed him to be. What did you need? A partner. The word came out before she could stop it. Someone who saw me as more than just a mother to his children and a keeper of his house. Someone who listened when I spoke and cared about what I had to say. Samuel nodded slowly. And he didn't give you that. He tried in his way, but his father had raised him to believe that women were meant to be managed, not heard. Every time I had an opinion, he looked at me like I'd sprouted a second head. Clara laughed bitterly. The day I told him I used to be a teacher, he asked why I'd waste my time on something like that. You were a teacher. Before I married, taught at a schoolhouse in Kansas for 3 years. Loved every minute of it. Clara's eyes grew distant. Then I met Jacob, and he was handsome and charming, and promised me the world. I gave up everything to follow him west. Do you regret it? Clara looked toward the window where she could see Thomas helping the twins build something in the snow. I regret losing myself, she said, but I don't regret them. Never them. Samuel followed her gaze. They're good children, strong, resilient. That comes from you. It comes from necessity. Same thing sometimes. They sat in comfortable silence for a long while. Clara finished her oatmeal, surprised to find that she'd eaten every bite. When had she last had an appetite? What happens now? She asked finally. Samuel leaned back in his chair. Now we prepare. Your father-in-law is coming, you said. When? His letter said he'd be here within the month. That was 2 weeks ago. So we got maybe 2 weeks, maybe less. Samuel's jaw tightened. What's his legal claim? He says I'm unfit. That a widow with no means and no family has no business raising children alone. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. He's got lawyers' money connections to every judge in the territory. I've got nothing. You've got those children's love. That counts for something. Not in a courtroom. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then, there might be another way. Clara looked at him sharply. What do you mean? A widow with no means is vulnerable, but a married woman with a husband, a ranch, and a stable home. He trailed off meaningfully. Clara's heart stopped. Are you suggesting? I ain't suggesting nothing. Samuel raised his hands. Just thinking out loud. A marriage of convenience is common enough out here. People do it for land, for protection, for 100 practical reasons. And what would you get out of it? Samuel met her eyes steadily. Help with the ranch, company in the long winters, maybe something like a family again. Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I barely know you, she said. You barely know me. You can't offer something like that after one night. I ain't asking you to decide now. Samuel's voice remained calm. I'm just putting it on the table. So you know you got options. So you know you ain't alone in this fight. Clara paced to the window, her arms wrapped tight around herself. Outside, Thomas had lifted little Sarah onto his shoulders. She was laughing, her arms stretched toward the sky. I swore I'd never depend on a man again, Clara whispered. After Jacob, I promised myself I'd stand on my own 2 feet or die trying. And you have. Samuel rose and came to stand beside her, not too close, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. You've stood on your own through things that would have broken most people. That ain't going to change just because you accept help. Clara shook her head. You don't understand. Every time I've trusted someone, every time I've let my guard down, I've paid for it. My father abandoned us when I was 12. My first love married another woman while I was waiting for him. Jacob promised me a future and gave me a slow death instead. And now you're asking me to trust again." Samuel didn't flinch. "I ain't asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust yourself. To know that you're strong enough to walk away if I ever give you cause to." Clara turned to look at him. His face was open honest without a trace of guile. "Why do you even care?" she demanded. "You could have any woman. Someone younger, prettier, without 6 children and a powerful enemy. Why choose this mess?" Samuel's expression softened. "Because I've had young and pretty," he said quietly. "I've had easy and simple. And I lost it all in a single week. Now I know that what matters ain't the package, it's the soul inside it. And your soul, Clara Whitmore, is the strongest I've ever seen." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "I need time," she said, "to think, to figure out what's best for my children." "Take all the time you need." Samuel stepped back, giving her space. "Whatever you decide, I'll help you fight. Marriage or no marriage, that's a promise." Clara nodded once sharply. Then she turned and walked outside into the cold where her children were waiting. The days that followed fell into a rhythm Clara hadn't expected. She woke early each morning before the children and started the fire while Samuel was out feeding the stock. By the time he returned, she had coffee brewing and breakfast on the stove. They worked side by side, mending fences, chopping wood, tending to the horses. Clara threw herself into the labor with a ferocity that surprised even her. Every blister on her hands, every ache in her back, felt like proof that she was earning her place. Samuel never commented on it. He simply adjusted to her pace, showed her the tricks of the ranch without condescension, and treated her as an equal partner in every task. The children adapted faster than Clara had dared hope. Thomas became Samuel's shadow, following him everywhere, soaking up knowledge like a dry sponge. The boy who had been forced to become a man too soon was finally allowed to be a student again. Mary Ellen's fever broke on the 3rd day. She was still weak, but the color returned to her cheeks, and she began helping Clara with the cooking. The twins found endless entertainment in the barn, chasing chickens and discovering kittens in the hayloft. And Sarah silent haunted. Little Sarah spoke her first word since her father's death. It happened on the 5th evening. Clara was washing dishes while Samuel read aloud from an old book of poems he'd found in the loft. The children sat around the fire, drowsy and content. "Horse?" Sarah said suddenly, pointing at the illustration in the book. Everyone went still. Clara dropped the dish she was holding. It clattered in the basin, but she didn't notice. She crossed the room in 3 steps and knelt before her daughter. "What did you say, baby?" Sarah looked up at her with wide, uncertain eyes. Then slowly she pointed at the picture again. "Horse?" she repeated. "Like Papa's horse." Clara pulled her daughter into her arms and held her so tight she thought her heart might burst. Tears streamed down her face, and she didn't try to stop them. Samuel looked away, but not before Clara saw the moisture in his own eyes. Later, after the children were asleep, Clara found him on the porch, staring out at the moonlit snow. "Thank you," she said softly. He didn't turn. For what? For giving her a place where she felt safe enough to speak again. Samuel shook his head. "That wasn't me. That was you. You're her mother. You're her home." Clara came to stand beside him. The cold bit at her cheeks, but she didn't mind. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you offered." Samuel went very still. And I'm not saying yes." Clara chose her words carefully. "But I'm not saying no either. I'm saying maybe. If we get to know each other better. If I can learn to trust that you won't turn into someone else once you've got what you want." Samuel finally looked at her. "That's fair," he said. "More than fair. There would be rules, boundaries. I won't share your bed until I'm ready, if I'm ever ready. And the children come first, always. Before you, before me, before anything else. I wouldn't expect any different." Clara studied his face in the moonlight. The lines around his eyes, the gray in his beard, the quiet strength in his jaw. "Why did you really stop that day?" she asked. "On the ridge, when you saw me in the snow. What made you get off your horse?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "I was going to ride past," he admitted. "That's the truth. I saw you from a distance, and my first thought was, ain't my problem. That's what this territory does to a man, makes him hard, makes him selfish, makes him blind to other people's suffering. What changed? I got closer, and I saw your face." His voice dropped. "You looked like Emily. Not the features, that wasn't it. But the expression, that look of someone who's been broken and rebuilt themselves from nothing only to watch it all fall apart again. Emily had that look the day we buried our daughter." Clara felt her throat tighten. "I couldn't ride past that look," Samuel continued. "Couldn't pretend I hadn't seen it. Because if I did, I'd be the same as all those people who looked away when Emily needed help. The same as all those folks who let her die alone while I was up in the mountains too proud to ask for anything." He turned to face her fully. "So I stopped. Not because I'm a good man, I ain't sure I am. But because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't." Clara reached out and placed her hand on his arm. It was the first time she'd touched him voluntarily. "You are a good man," she said, "whether you believe it or not." Samuel looked down at her hand, then back at her face. "I'm trying to be," he said. "That's all any of us can do." They stood together in the cold, watching the snow fall, and for the first time since Jacob died, Clara felt something other than fear when she thought about the future. The rider came on the 7th day. Clara was in the barn brushing down the horses when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Her hand went immediately to the pitchfork, her body tensing for a fight. Samuel appeared beside her, his rifle already in his hands. "Stay here," he said. "Keep the children inside." But Clara followed him anyway, staying just behind the barn door, where she could see without being seen. The rider was young, barely out of boyhood, wearing a deputy's badge and an expression of profound discomfort. He reined in hard near the porch, his horse dancing nervously. "Mr. Thornton," he called out. Samuel stepped forward, rifle held loosely at his side. "That's me. What do you want?" The deputy reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "Got a message. From Judge Cornelius Whitmore. He's in town, arrived yesterday. Says he wants to see Mrs. Clara Whitmore at the courthouse tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock sharp." Clara's blood ran cold. Samuel took the paper but didn't unfold it. "And if she don't come?" The deputy shifted in his saddle. "Judge says he's got legal authority to take the children into custody if she refuses. Says he'll send men if he has to." Clara stepped out from behind the barn door. "Tell the judge I'll be there," she said. Her voice was steady, even though her heart was pounding. "And tell him if he tries to take my children by force, he'll regret it." The deputy's eyes widened. He looked at Samuel, then back at Clara. "Ma'am, I'd advise against threatening a territorial judge." "That ain't a threat." Clara took another step forward. "It's a promise. Now get off this property before I change my mind about letting you leave peacefully." The deputy didn't need to be told twice. He wheeled his horse around and rode out faster than he'd come in snow, spraying from the horse's hooves. Samuel unfolded the paper and read it silently. His jaw tightened with every line. "What does it say?" Clara demanded. He handed it to her without a word. Clara read the legal language, the threats wrapped in formal phrases, the cold certainty of a man who believed himself untouchable. Unfit guardian. Moral turpitude. Best interests of the children. Full custody transferred to blood relative. Her hands started to shake. "He's going to take them," she whispered. "He's going to walk into that courthouse and take my children, and there's nothing I can do to stop him." "There's always something." Samuel's voice was hard. "He wants a fight. We'll give him one." "With what? We've got no lawyer, no money, no influence. He's a judge, Samuel. He makes the rules." "Not all rules are legal." Samuel took the paper from her hands and tore it in half. Some rules are older, stronger. The rule that says a mother don't give up her children without a fight. The rule that says good people stand together against tyrants. Clara shook her head. Pretty words don't win courtroom battles. Maybe not, but they win hearts, and hearts win communities, and communities. Samuel met her eyes. Communities have turned against powerful men before, when they see the truth. Clara stared at him. What are you suggesting? Tomorrow you go to that courthouse. But you don't go alone. You go with every person in this territory who's ever been stepped on by Cornelius Whitmore. You go with your head high and your children by your side. And you make him look into the eyes of the people he's trying to destroy. Clara laughed bitterly. You think anyone in Bitter Creek will stand with me? They wouldn't even sell me flour. Not everyone in Bitter Creek is heartless. Most folks are just scared. Samuel paused. But scared people can become brave when someone shows them it's possible. And if they don't, if I walk into that courthouse alone, and he takes everything. Samuel reached out and took her hand. Then we figure out something else. We run, we hide, we fight whatever it takes. But I will not let that man destroy what you've built. I will not let him win. Clara looked down at their joined hands. His fingers were rough, calloused from years of hard work. But they were steady, certain. Why? She asked the question she'd asked a dozen times before. Why are you doing this for us? Samuel smiled a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. Because when I saw you in that snow carrying those children refusing to fall, I saw what I wanted to become. He squeezed her hand gently. You're not just fighting for yourself, Clara. You're fighting for every person who's ever been told they weren't enough. And I want to stand beside that fight. Clara felt something crack inside her, that wall of distrust built stone by stone over years of betrayal, finally showing its first real breach. She didn't say yes, didn't make promises she wasn't ready to keep. But she squeezed his hand back. And that night, as she lay awake listening to her children breathe, Clara Whitmore made a decision. She was done running, done hiding, done waiting for men to decide her fate. Tomorrow she would walk into that courthouse and face the man who wanted to destroy her, and she would not break. The morning came too fast. Clara dressed in the dark, her fingers trembling as she buttoned her only good dress, the blue one she'd worn to Jacob's funeral, faded now, but still respectable. She braided her hair tight against her skull and pinched her cheeks for color. When she stepped into the main room, Samuel was already waiting. He'd shaved, trimmed his beard close, and put on a clean shirt she'd never seen before. His rifle leaned against the wall by the door. You ain't bringing that, Clara said. I ain't leaving it either. Samuel, if you walk into a courthouse with a weapon, I'll leave it in the wagon. His jaw was set. But it's coming with us. Clara didn't argue. She understood. Sometimes the weight of a weapon wasn't about using it. It was about knowing you could. Thomas appeared from the loft already dressed, his face pale but determined. I want to come, he said. No. Clara shook her head. You stay here with your sisters. Mama, please. He's my grandfather. I got a right to face him. You got a right to be safe. Clara crossed to him, took his face in her hands. I need you here, Thomas. I need to know that if something goes wrong, you'll protect your sisters. Can you do that for me? Thomas's eyes glistened. What if he takes you away? He won't. But what if he does? Clara pulled him close, pressing her lips to his forehead. Then you run, she whispered. You take your sisters to Mr. Samuel's cabin and you don't look back. You hear me? Thomas nodded against her shoulder. His arms tightened around her. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. More than anything in this world. She held him for a long moment, memorizing the feel of him, the smell of him. Then she pulled back and straightened his collar. You're the man of this family, she said. Act like it. Thomas squared his shoulders. Yes, ma'am. Clara kissed each of her daughters goodbye, Mary Ellen still weak but standing. The twins confused and clingy. Little Sarah, who had started speaking again but still didn't smile. "Mama will be back before supper," she told them. "Mr. Samuel and I have some business in town." "What kind of business?" Mary Ellen asked. Clara hesitated. "Grown-up business. Nothing for you to worry about." But Mary Ellen's eyes were too old, too knowing. She'd seen too much to be fooled by comfortable lies. "It's grandfather, isn't it?" she said quietly. "He's coming for us." Clara felt her heart crack. "He's trying," she admitted. "But I won't let him. I will never let anyone take you from me." Mary Ellen nodded slowly. Then she reached out and took her mother's hand. "You're the bravest person I know," she said. "You'll win. I know you will." Clara squeezed her daughter's fingers, unable to speak. Then she turned and walked out the door before any of them could see her cry. The ride to town took 2 hours. Clara sat beside Samuel on the wagon bench, her hands folded in her lap, her spine straight as a poker. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with understanding rather than awkwardness. As they crested the final hill, Bitter Creek spread out below them, a cluster of wooden buildings huddled against the winter-cold smoke rising from chimneys, horses tied to hitching posts, and in front of the courthouse, a black carriage that cost more than most folks earned in a year. "He's here," Clara said. "I see him." Samuel's hands tightened on the reins. "You ready?" "No." Clara took a deep breath. "But I'm going anyway." They pulled up to the courthouse, just as the clock tower struck 10. Clara climbed down from the wagon, ignoring the stares of the townspeople gathered on the wooden sidewalk. She could feel their eyes on her, curious, judgmental, afraid. Let them stare, she thought. Let them see a woman who refuses to break. Samuel fell into step beside her. His rifle stayed in the wagon, but he walked like a man ready for anything. The courthouse doors were heavy oak, scarred by years of hard use. Clara pushed them open and stepped inside. The room was smaller than she'd expected. A single chamber with wooden benches, a raised platform at the front where the judge would sit, and tall windows that let in pale winter light. A handful of people were scattered across the benches, most of them lawyers or clerks with papers in their hands. And standing near the front, his back to the door, was Judge Cornelius Whitmore. He was taller than Clara remembered, with silver hair, swept back from a high forehead, and a black coat that probably cost more than her husband had earned in his best year. When he turned, his eyes were ice blue and completely empty. "Clara," he said. His voice was smooth, cultured, with just a hint of southern drawl. "How kind of you to come." "I didn't have much choice," Clara replied. "You made sure of that." Cornelius smiled, a thin, cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I've always admired your spirit. Even when Jacob was alive, you had more fire in you than he ever did." He clasped his hands behind his back. "Such a pity you wasted it on defiance rather than cooperation." "I didn't come here to exchange pleasantries with you, Cornelius." "Judge Whitmore," he corrected. "We're in a courthouse after all. Propriety matters." Clara's jaw tightened. "Fine. Judge Whitmore. Say what you've got to say." Cornelius gestured toward the benches. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." "I'll stand." "Suit yourself." Cornelius pulled a sheaf of papers from his coat. "I assume you received my letter. You understand the situation." "I understand that you're trying to steal my children." "Steal?" Cornelius raised an eyebrow. "Such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as rescue. Those children are Whitmore's. They deserve a proper upbringing, education, society, opportunities that you simply cannot provide. They have everything they need." "Do they?" Cornelius began to pace slowly. "A mother living in sin with a strange man, a roof over their heads that belongs to someone else, no schooling, no church, no prospects for the future." He shook his head sadly. "My son would be devastated to see what's become of his family." Your son is dead. Clara's voice was flat. And he died trying to live up to expectations that were never fair in the first place. Something flickered in Cornelius's eyes. Anger, perhaps, or something darker. Be careful, Clara. You're speaking to a judge in his own territory. Words have consequences. So do actions. Clara stepped forward. You never visited those children. Not once. You never sent money when we were starving, never wrote letters asking how they were doing. And now suddenly you care about their welfare. Forgive me if I don't believe a word of it. My relationship with my grandchildren is none of your concern. They are my children. Everything about them is my concern. Cornelius's smile faded. The mask of civility slipped, revealing something harder underneath. Let me be clear, he said. I have the law on my side. I have witnesses prepared to testify that you are an unfit mother, that you've been living with a man out of wedlock, that your children are malnourished and uneducated, that you are mentally unstable due to grief. Those are lies. Are they? Cornelius tilted his head. The general store owner says you came in raving like a madwoman. The church deacon says you haven't attended services in months. And several upstanding citizens are prepared to swear they've seen you entertaining Mr. Thornton in ways that no decent woman would. Clara's blood ran cold. That's not true. None of it is true. Truth is a flexible thing, my dear, especially in a courtroom. Cornelius spread his hands. But it doesn't have to come to that. I'm offering you a choice. What choice? Sign over custody of the children voluntarily. Walk away. Start a new life somewhere else unburdened by responsibilities you clearly cannot handle. He pulled a document from his papers. In exchange, I'll provide you with a modest sum enough to establish yourself in a new town, perhaps find a suitable husband. It's more than generous given the circumstances. Clara stared at him. You want me to sell my children? I want you to do what's best for them. And what's best is a stable home, a proper education, and the Whitmore name. Not a dirt-poor existence on some stranger's ranch in the middle of nowhere. No. Cornelius blinked. I beg your pardon. I said no. Clara's voice rose. I will not sign anything. I will not give you my children. And I will not be bullied by a man who cares more about his legacy than about the human beings he's supposed to protect. The courtroom went silent. Even the clerks stopped shuffling their papers. Cornelius's face darkened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. You think that man will protect you. Cornelius gestured toward Samuel, who had remained silent near the door. A broken-down rancher with nothing to his name. He can't save you from the law, Clara. No one can. Samuel stepped forward. With respect, Judge, I ain't trying to save anyone from the law. I'm trying to make sure the law does what it's supposed to do, protect innocent people from powerful men who abuse their position. Cornelius's eyes narrowed. And who are you to speak on such matters? I'm Samuel Thornton, Union Army 3rd Minnesota Infantry. Fought at Vicksburg, Chattanooga, and Atlanta. Buried my wife and daughter 4 years back. Samuel's voice was steady. And I know something about men who use their authority to crush people beneath them. I fought a war against that kind of thinking. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Some of the spectators shifted in their seats. Cornelius's jaw tightened. Your military service is irrelevant. Is it? Samuel took another step forward. Because the way I see it, a man who tries to take children from their mother using lies and intimidation ain't much different from the slavers we fought to bring down. Different methods, same cruelty. The murmur grew louder. Someone in the back said, He's got a point. Cornelius held up his hand. Enough. This is a legal matter, not a political debate. He turned to Clara. You have until noon tomorrow to reconsider. After that, I'll have no choice but to pursue this through official channels. And I promise you, Mrs. Whitmore, you will not like the outcome. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Cornelius gathered his papers. I came here hoping we could resolve this like civilized people. Clearly I was mistaken. He walked toward the door, pausing just as he reached Samuel. You should choose your battles more carefully, Mr. Thornton. This one is already lost. Samuel didn't flinch. Reckon I'll be the judge of that. Cornelius smiled coldly. We'll see. Then he was gone. The courthouse doors swinging shut behind him. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding. Around her, the spectators began to whisper and shuffle, but she barely heard them. Clara. Samuel was at her side. Clara, look at me. She turned. Her vision blurred with tears she'd been holding back. He's going to win, she whispered. He's got money power connections. He's going to take my children and there's nothing I can do. That ain't true. Didn't you hear him? He's got witnesses. People willing to lie for him. How do I fight that? Samuel took her hands in his. You fight it by not giving up. You fight it by standing your ground no matter what he throws at you. His voice was fierce. That man is a bully, Clara, and bullies only win when good people stop fighting. What if good people aren't enough? They're always enough. Samuel squeezed her fingers. I've seen it. On battlefields and hospitals in 1,000 small moments, where everything seemed lost. Good people standing together can move mountains. We just have to find enough of them. Clara shook her head. This town hates me. They won't stand with me. Maybe not all of them, but some will. Samuel glanced around the courtroom. Some of these folks have their own grudges against Cornelius Whitmore. Their own reasons to want him knocked down a peg. We just have to find them. A voice spoke up from the benches. He's right, you know. Clara turned. A woman was standing near the back, middle-aged with gray-streaked hair and a face lined by hard years. She wore a plain dress and work-worn boots, and her eyes held a quiet fury. I'm Agatha Mills, she said. My husband died 3 years back. Judge Whitmore ruled that his debts transferred to me even though I'd had nothing to do with his business dealings. Took my farm, my livestock, everything. She stepped into the aisle. I ain't got much left, but I got my voice. And I'd be honored to use it against that snake. Another voice. Me too. A man stood up, weathered-bearded, with the look of a farmer who'd seen too many bad seasons. Name's Ezra Hawkins. Whitmore cost me my water rights 5 years back. Ruled in favor of some fancy rancher who'd never worked a day in his life. He spat on the floor. I'd testify against him in a heartbeat. More murmurs. More people shifting in their seats. A young woman near the front spoke up. He foreclosed on my mother's house when she was dying. Wouldn't even give her time to say goodbye to her things. An old man by the window. His men beat my son for speaking out against him at a town meeting. Boy was laid up for 3 weeks. Clara stared at them, all tears streaming down her face. Why? She managed. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Agatha Mills walked forward until she stood directly in front of Clara. Because someone has to, she said simply. Because if we let men like Cornelius Whitmore keep winning, there won't be anything left worth fighting for. She took Clara's hand. You're not alone, honey. You never were. Clara broke. The sobs came without warning, great heaving waves of grief and relief, and something she barely recognized anymore. Hope. Samuel caught her as her knees buckled. He held her against his chest, one hand on her back, the other cradling her head. I got you, he murmured. I got you. Around them, the courtroom transformed. People who'd been strangers minutes before gathered close, forming a wall of support. Agatha Mills began organizing, assigning tasks, gathering names. We need testimonies, she said briskly. Written statements from everyone who's got a grudge against Whitmore. We need character witnesses for Mrs. Whitmore here, people who can speak to her fitness as a mother. I can do that, Ezra Hawkins said. Seen her with her children at the store. Never saw a woman more devoted. "We need a lawyer," someone else said. "Someone who ain't afraid of the judge." "I know one," Agatha replied. "Lives 2 towns over. Used to be a prosecutor in Kansas City before he got tired of the corruption. He's got no love for men like Whitmore." Clara raised her head from Samuel's chest. "You'd do all this?" she asked. "Risk everything to help a stranger?" Agatha smiled a fierce warrior's smile. "Honey, we ain't strangers anymore. We're neighbors. And out here, neighbors look after each other." The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Clara barely slept. Messages were sent. People were gathered. Plans were made. By the time dawn broke over Bitter Creek, a small army had assembled. Not soldiers, but something more powerful. Ordinary people who'd had enough. The lawyer arrived just before noon, a thin, serious man named Marcus Webb, with spectacles and a worn leather satchel full of legal books. He listened to Clara's story, asked sharp questions, and nodded slowly. "This won't be easy," he said. "Whitmore's been building power in this territory for 20 years. But he's made enemies too. Lots of them." He smiled grimly. "And enemies have long memories." "Can we win?" Clara asked. "I don't know," Webb admitted. "But we can fight. And sometimes that's all that matters." When Clara walked into the courthouse for the second time, she wasn't alone. Behind her came Samuel, steady as bedrock. Behind him came Agatha Mills, Ezra Hawkins, and a dozen others, farmers and widows and shopkeepers and laborers, all of them with stories to tell. Cornelius Whitmore was waiting at the front of the room. When he saw the crowd, his face went pale. "What is this?" he demanded. Clara stepped forward. "This is justice," she said. "The kind you forgot existed." And for the first time since Jacob died, Clara Whitmore felt truly powerful. Cornelius Whitmore recovered quickly. His shock lasted only a moment before the mask slid back into place, cold, calculating, utterly controlled. "This is highly irregular," he said, turning to address the room. "A legal proceeding is not a public spectacle." Marcus Webb stepped forward, his leather satchel under his arm. "With respect, Your Honor, custody hearings in this territory are open to the public. Section 12 of the Territorial Code established in 1871. He adjusted his spectacles. "I'm sure a man of your legal expertise is familiar with the statute." Cornelius's eyes narrowed. "And who are you?" "Marcus Webb, attorney at law. I'll be representing Mrs. Whitmore in this matter." "Mrs. Whitmore can't afford an attorney. I'm working pro bono." Webb smiled thinly. "Consider it a civic duty." The tension in the room thickened. Clara could feel it pressing against her skin, heavy and electric. She kept her spine straight, her eyes fixed on Cornelius, refusing to show the terror clawing at her chest. "Very well," Cornelius said. He moved to the raised platform at the front of the room, settling into the judge's chair as if it were a throne. "Let's proceed. I call this hearing to order." "Objection." Webb's voice cut through the air. "You cannot preside over a case in which you are the petitioner. That's a clear conflict of interest. There is no other judge in this territory. Then we request a postponement until an impartial judge can be brought in from the state capital." Cornelius's jaw tightened. "Denied. This matter will be resolved today." "Then I must formally protest." "Your protest is noted." Cornelius slammed his palm on the wooden desk. "Now sit down, Mr. Webb, or I'll have you removed." Webb didn't sit. He stood his ground, his thin frame somehow seeming larger than before. "I will not sit down, and neither will anyone else in this room who believes in justice." He turned to face the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're witnessing is not a legal proceeding. It's a farce. A powerful man using the machinery of law to steal children from their mother." Murmurs rippled through the spectators. Cornelius's face reddened. "Counselor, you are dangerously close to contempt." "I'm dangerously close to the truth." Webb pulled a stack of papers from his satchel. "I have here sworn affidavits from 17 citizens of this territory, all detailing abuses of power by Judge Cornelius Whitmore. fraudulent rulings, stolen property, intimidation of witnesses. Shall I read them aloud? Cornelius stood abruptly. This is outrageous. Is it? Clara stepped forward. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled at her sides. Is it outrageous to speak the truth? Is it outrageous to stand up against a man who has spent decades crushing anyone who gets in his way? You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Clara's voice rose. I know that you never visited your grandchildren, not once in 6 years. I know that you never sent a single letter, never asked how they were doing, never cared whether they lived or died. And now you suddenly want custody. Now you suddenly care about their welfare. She took another step toward him. This isn't about them. This has never been about them. This is about control. This is about punishing me for not being the obedient daughter-in-law you wanted. This is about your precious Whitmore legacy and your inability to accept that anyone could possibly defy you. Cornelius's composure cracked. Something dark flickered behind his eyes. You ungrateful woman. I took your husband into my family. I gave him everything, education, connections, opportunities. And how did he repay me? By running off to this godforsaken wilderness, with a school teacher who filled his head with nonsense about equality and independence. Jacob made his own choices. Jacob was weak. Cornelius's voice dripped with contempt. Just like his mother, just like you. Too soft to do what needed to be done, too proud to accept help from those who knew better. Clara felt the words land like blows, but she didn't flinch. Jacob loved his children, she said quietly. He worked himself to death trying to provide for them, and whatever his flaws, whatever his weaknesses, he was a better man than you will ever be. Silence. Cornelius stared at her, his face twisted with rage. For a moment Clara thought he might strike her. Then slowly, deliberately, he sat back down. I see, he said. His voice had gone cold again, colder than before. You want to play this game. Very well. He shuffled through his papers. I have testimony from the owner of the general store that Mrs. Whitmore came in raving like a lunatic, frightening customers and making threats. I have testimony from the church deacon that she has not attended services in over 6 months. I have testimony from 3 upstanding citizens that she has been living in sin with a man who is not her husband. All lies, Clara said. Can you prove Can you prove they're true? Cornelius smiled. In a court of law, the burden of proof lies with the accused, and the accused, Mrs. Whitmore, is you. Webb stepped forward. Actually, in a custody case, the burden lies with the petitioner. You must prove that Mrs. Whitmore is unfit, not merely allege it. I have witnesses. Paid witnesses. Agatha Mills's voice rang out from the crowd. Everyone knows you buy testimony like other men buy cattle. It's been your method for 20 years. More murmurs. Louder now, angrier. Cornelius's eyes swept the room. For the first time, Clara saw something other than arrogance in his face. Fear. He was losing control. He was accustomed to rooms that bent to his will, people who cowered at his name. This was different. This was a room full of people who had nothing left to lose. Order, Cornelius said. His voice cracked slightly. I demand order. You demand nothing. Samuel Thornton stepped forward, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. You've been demanding things from people your whole life, and they've been too scared to say no. But we ain't scared anymore. Cornelius rose again. You have no standing here, Mr. Thornton. You're not a relative of these children. You're not their guardian. You're nothing but a stranger who saw an opportunity to take advantage of a vulnerable woman. Samuel's jaw tightened. I'm a man who believes in doing what's right. Something you clearly know nothing about. And what is right in your estimation? Taking another man's grandchildren, destroying a family, protecting innocent people from men who would use them for their own ends. Samuel's voice was low but fierce. I've seen your kind before, Judge. Saw plenty of them during the war, men who talked about honor and duty, while they sent boys to die for their profits. Men who built empires on the backs of people they considered beneath them. He stepped closer to the platform. You ain't nothing special, Cornelius Whitmore. You're just a bully with a fancy title. And bullies lose. Eventually, they always lose. Cornelius's face went white with rage. His hand moved toward his coat, toward something hidden beneath the fabric. Samuel, Clara shouted. But before anyone could move, Ezra Hawkins was there, grabbing Cornelius's arm and wrenching it behind his back. I don't think so, Judge, Ezra said grimly. I know what you keep in that pocket. He reached into Cornelius's coat and pulled out a small derringer, 2 barrels polished wood, deadly at close range. The crowd gasped. Cornelius struggled against Ezra's grip. Unhand me. This is assault. I'll have you all arrested. For what? Agatha Mills crossed her arms. For stopping you from shooting an unarmed man in cold blood. I reckon the territorial marshal might see that different. As if summoned by her words, the courthouse doors burst open. A man in a worn duster coat strode in, a silver star pinned to his chest. He was older than Samuel Gray at the temples, with a face that had seen too much and forgiven too little. What in blazes is going on here? He demanded. Marshal Cooper. Cornelius's voice was desperate now. Arrest these people. They've assaulted me. They've disrupted a legal proceeding. Marshal Cooper looked at the derringer in Ezra's hand, then at Cornelius, still pinned against the platform, then at the crowd of townspeople standing together united. Seems to me like you're the one causing trouble, Judge. His voice was flat. Drawing a weapon in a courthouse is a felony, even for someone with your connections. I was defending myself. Against what words? The marshal shook his head slowly. I've been hearing stories about you for years, Whitmore. Figured most of them were exaggeration. Now I'm starting to think they were understated. He walked forward, his boots echoing in the sudden silence. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to drop this custody case. You're going to leave Mrs. Whitmore and her children alone. And you're going to get out of my territory before sundown. Cornelius's face contorted. You can't do this. I'm a territorial judge. We're a territorial judge. Marshal Cooper reached into his coat and pulled out a folded document. This came in on the telegraph this morning. Seems some concerned citizens wrote to the governor about your conduct. He's ordered a full investigation. Until that's complete, you're suspended from the bench. The room erupted. Cheers, shouts, people embracing each other. Clara stood frozen, unable to process what she was hearing. Cornelius Whitmore stared at the document in the marshal's hand. All the color drained from his face. This isn't over, he whispered. Do you hear me? This isn't over. Yes, it is. Clara walked toward him, her voice steady. You've lost. Accept it. Their eyes met. For a moment, something passed between them, not hatred exactly, but the recognition of 2 people who had fought to the bitter end and discovered who was stronger. Then Cornelius's shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him like air from a punctured balloon. My son is dead, he said quietly. Those children are all I have left of him. No. Clara shook her head. You have memories. You have his name. But you don't get to use his children to fill the hole he left behind. They're not possessions, Cornelius. They're people. And they deserve better than to be weapons in your war against the world. Cornelius said nothing. He looked old, suddenly older than his years, broken in ways that money couldn't fix. Marshal Cooper gestured to his deputies. Escort the judge to his carriage. Make sure he's out of town by nightfall. As they led Cornelius away, he looked back once at Clara. His eyes were empty, defeated. Tell them, he said softly. Tell them I'm sorry. For everything. Then he was gone. The courthouse doors swinging shut behind him. Clara stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by people who had risked everything to help her and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Samuel's arms wrapped around her from behind. She leaned into him, letting herself be held, letting herself breathe. "It's over," he murmured against her hair. "You won." "We won," she corrected. "All of us." Agatha Mills appeared at her side, eyes bright with tears. "I ain't never seen anything like that," she said. "A room full of people standing up against power. It's something I'll remember till the day I die." Clara took her hand. "Thank you," she said, "for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Agatha squeezed her fingers. "That's what neighbors are for, honey." The crowd began to disperse, people drifting out into the cold morning air, sharing stories, making plans. Clara heard snatches of conversation, talk of celebrations of relief, of futures that suddenly seemed possible. Marcus Webb approached his leather satchel, closed his work done. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "it's been an honor. I don't know how to repay you." "No repayment necessary." Webb smiled. "Justice is its own reward. Besides, I've been wanting to take a swing at Cornelius Whitmore for 15 years. Consider me satisfied." He tipped his hat and walked out into the morning. Clara looked up at Samuel. "I need to see my children," she said. "I need to hold them." "Then let's go home." Home. The word sounded different now, fuller, warmer. Clara let Samuel lead her to the wagon, and they rode out of Bitter Creek together, leaving the courthouse and all its ghosts behind them. The children came running when they heard the wagon wheels. Thomas reached her first, throwing his arms around her waist with a force that nearly knocked her down. "Mama, we were so scared. We thought we didn't know if—" Clara held him tight, breathing in the smell of him, feeling his heart pound against her chest. "It's over," she said. "He's gone. He can't hurt us anymore." Mary Ellen was next, then the twins, then little Sarah, all of them piling on, until Clara was buried in a tangle of small arms and tear-streaked faces. "I told you," Mary Ellen said, her voice muffled against Clara's shoulder. "I told you you'd win." Clara laughed a real laugh, the first in months. "You were right, baby. You were absolutely right." She looked up to see Samuel standing a few feet away, watching them with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. Joy, yes, but something deeper too. Something that looked like love. She reached out her hand. "Come here," she said. Samuel hesitated. "This is your moment. Your family. You are my family." Clara's voice was firm. "You're part of this now, whether you like it or not." Samuel smiled slowly. Then he crossed the distance between them and knelt beside her in the snow, surrounded by children who weren't his blood, but were becoming his heart. That night, after the children were fed and bathed and tucked into bed, Clara sat with Samuel by the fire. The cabin was quiet now, filled with the peaceful sounds of sleeping children and crackling flames. "I've been thinking," Clara said. Samuel looked at her. "About what?" "About what you asked me. Before all this happened." She stared into the fire. "About marriage." Samuel went very still. "You don't have to decide anything right now," he said. "You've been through hell and back. Take your time." "I've had time." Clara turned to face him. "I've had weeks of watching you with my children. Weeks of seeing how you treat them, not like burdens, not like responsibilities, but like people worth knowing, worth loving." Her voice dropped. "And I've had weeks of watching you treat me the same way. Not like someone to be managed or controlled. Not like someone who needs to be saved. But like a partner. An equal." Samuel's eyes glistened in the firelight. "That's how you deserve to be treated," he said. "How everyone deserves to be treated." Clara reached out and took his hand. "I'm not saying I'm ready for everything," she said carefully. "I'm not saying this will be easy. I'm still scared. I'm still learning to trust. But—" She took a deep breath. "I want to try. I want to build something with you, something real, something that lasts." Samuel was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Clara, I've loved you since the day I saw you in that snow. I didn't know what to call it then. Didn't know if it was pity or admiration or something else entirely. But I know now." He raised her hand to his lips. "I love you. Your strength. Your fire. The way you fight for the people you care about. The way you refuse to give up when everything was against you." His eyes met hers. "I don't want to save you. I want to stand beside you. I want to build a life with you, not because you need me, but because we're better together than we are apart." Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "Is that a proposal?" she asked. Samuel smiled. "Reckon it is." Clara leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, the kiss of two people who had been hurt before and were choosing to risk it again. When she pulled back, Samuel's face was transformed. He looked younger somehow, lighter. "Is that a yes?" he asked. Clara laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said. "It's a yes." Samuel pulled her into his arms and held her against his chest. She could feel his heart beating steady, sure like everything else about him. "We'll do this right," he murmured. "We'll take it slow. We'll make sure the children are comfortable. We'll build something they can be proud of." "I know we will." Clara closed her eyes. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt safe. Not because someone was protecting her, but because she'd found someone worth protecting. The fire burned low. The snow fell soft outside the windows. And in a small cabin in the Wyoming Territory, two broken people began the slow, beautiful work of becoming whole again. The next morning, Clara told the children. She gathered them around the breakfast table, all 6 of them from Thomas down to the baby in his wooden high chair, and explained what had happened in the courthouse. She told them about Grandfather Whitmore, about the people who had stood up for them, about the future that now lay open before them. And then she told them about Samuel. Thomas was the first to speak. "So, Mr. Sam is going to be our new father." Clara hesitated. "He's going to be my husband. But what he is to you, that's your choice. He'll never try to replace your father. He just wants to be part of our family if you'll let him." Thomas looked at Samuel, who sat quietly at the end of the table. "Do you love my mother?" Thomas asked. Samuel met the boy's eyes steadily. "I do." "Will you take care of her even when things get hard?" "I will." Thomas nodded slowly. Then he extended his hand across the table. "Then I reckon you can stay." Samuel shook the boy's hand, his face solemn. "Thank you, Thomas. I won't let you down." Mary Ellen spoke up. "Does this mean we get to live here forever?" Clara smiled. "This is our home now, all of us together." The twins started cheering. Little Sarah climbed down from her chair and walked over to Samuel. She stared up at him for a long moment, her face serious. Then she raised her arms. "Up," she said. It was only the second word she'd spoken since her father died. Samuel lifted her gently, settling her against his hip. Sarah laid her head on his shoulder and closed her eyes. Clara watched them, this man she'd known for barely 2 weeks, holding her daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world, and felt her heart crack open in a new way. Not with pain this time, with hope. The wedding came 3 weeks later, on a morning so cold the breath froze white in the air before it could fade. Clara wore her blue dress again, the same one she'd worn to face Cornelius Whitmore, but Agatha Mills had worked magic with needle and thread. New lace at the collar, tiny white flowers embroidered along the hem, a ribbon of pale silk woven through the bodice. It wasn't a fancy gown, but it was hers, and it was beautiful. The ceremony was held in the small church at the edge of Bitter Creek. The same church that had refused Clara charity, the same church whose deacon had testified against her. But Reverend Patterson was new, a young man with kind eyes, who'd heard about what happened in the courthouse and insisted on officiating himself. "Every soul deserves a fresh start," he'd said when he visited the ranch. "And it seems to me that you've more than earned yours." Clara stood at the back of the church. Now her children arranged before her like a staircase. Thomas, tall and solemn, in a borrowed suit. Mary Ellen holding the twins' hands. Little Sarah clutching a bundle of dried wildflowers she'd gathered herself. "You ready, Mama?" Thomas asked. Clara looked past him down the narrow aisle to where Samuel Thornton stood waiting. He wore a clean shirt and his best coat, his beard trimmed close, his hands clasped in front of him. When their eyes met, his whole face softened. "I'm ready," Clara said. They walked together, all of them, the whole family, down that aisle toward the man who had changed everything. The church was full. Agatha Mills sat in the front pew, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. Ezra Hawkins stood near the back, arms crossed, looking almost proud. Marcus Webb had come all the way from 2 towns over, his leather satchel tucked under the pew. And there were others too. People Clara didn't recognize, people who had heard the story and wanted to witness it. People who believed in second chances and wanted to see one come true. When Clara reached the altar, Samuel took her hands. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "You look terrified." A smile tugged at his lips. "Maybe a little." Reverend Patterson cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of 2 souls who have found each other against remarkable odds. In a world that often seems cold and unforgiving, love like this, earned through hardship, built on trust, proven through trial, is a rare and precious thing." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "Samuel Thornton," the Reverend continued, "do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? To have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for as long as you both shall live?" Samuel's grip on her hands tightened. "I do," he said. His voice was steady, certain. "And Clara Whitmore, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for as long as you both shall live?" Clara looked into Samuel's eyes. Those eyes that had seen so much pain, carried so much grief, and still found room for hope. "I do," she said. The Reverend smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming and the grace of Almighty God, I pronounce you husband and wife." He nodded to Samuel. "You may kiss your bride." Samuel released her hands and cupped her face instead, tilting it gently upward. The kiss was soft, tender, a promise, rather than a proclamation. The church erupted in cheers. The children swarmed them, immediately, small arms wrapping around legs and waists. Thomas hung back for a moment, then stepped forward and extended his hand to Samuel. "Welcome to the family," he said. "Sir," Samuel laughed and pulled the boy into a hug instead. "I told you don't call me sir. Makes me feel old." "What should I call you then?" Samuel considered. "Whatever feels right. No rush to figure it out." Thomas nodded slowly. Something shifted in his face, a weight lifting, a wall coming down. "Okay," he said. "Pa?" Samuel's eyes glistened. He pressed his hand to Thomas's shoulder and squeezed. "Okay, son." The reception was held at the ranch. Agatha Mills had organized everything: food brought by neighbors, music provided by Ezra Hawkins's fiddle lanterns strung between the porch posts to hold back the winter dark. Clara moved through the celebration like a woman in a dream. She accepted congratulations, shared embraces, watched her children laugh and play with other children they'd never met before. The isolation of the past months, the years fell away like a shed skin. "You did good, honey." Clara turned. Agatha stood beside her, a cup of warm cider in her weathered hands. "I didn't do anything," Clara said. "You all did. I just showed up." "That's where you're wrong." Agatha took a sip of her cider. "Showing up is the hardest part. Standing your ground when everything in you wants to run. That takes courage most people never find." Clara looked out at the gathering, the neighbors who had become friends, the strangers who had become allies. "I was so scared," she admitted. "The whole time I was terrified. I kept waiting for something to go wrong, for the other shoe to drop. That's what fear does. Makes you believe the worst is always coming. Agatha reached out and squeezed Clara's arm. But sometimes the best comes instead. And you've got to be brave enough to let it. Clara felt something release in her chest, some last knot of anxiety she hadn't known she was holding. Thank you, Agatha, for everything. Don't thank me. Just live well. Agatha smiled. That's all any of us want for each other out here. To live well and die knowing we mattered. Later, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Clara sat with Samuel on the porch, wrapped in quilts against the cold. The stars were bright overhead, brighter than Clara had ever seen them, scattered across the black sky, like scattered diamonds. I keep waiting to wake up, she said quietly. Samuel turned to look at her. From what? This. All of it. Clara gestured vaguely at the night, the ranch, the cabin behind them, where her children slept safe and warm. A month ago, I was dying in the snow with 6 hungry kids, and nothing but my own stubbornness to keep me going. Now I have a home, a husband, a future. Does it feel real? It feels impossible. Samuel took her hand. I felt the same way after Emily died, he said. Kept thinking the grief would ease up, that I'd wake up one morning and feel normal again. But it never happened. Not until you. Clara looked at him. What changed? Everything. Nothing. Samuel shrugged. I realized that waiting for life to feel normal was a waste of time. Normal isn't coming back, but something new might, if I'm brave enough to let it in. He squeezed her fingers. You walked into my life like a storm, Clara. You and your 6 children, and your broken heart, and your fierce, unshakable spirit. And suddenly all those years of feeling numb just stopped. I started caring again, started believing again. Clara felt tears slide down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. I was so angry at God, she whispered. After Jacob died, after everything fell apart, I thought he'd abandoned me, abandoned my children. And now, Clara looked up at the stars. Now I think maybe he sent you. Maybe all of this, the suffering, the loss, the fear, was leading somewhere. Leading here. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then, I ain't a religious man. Lost whatever faith I had during the war. But if there is a God, and if he did bring us together, he paused, then I owe him more than I can ever repay. They sat in silence, wrapped in quilts and starlight, 2 broken people who had somehow become whole. I love you, Clara said. It was the first time she'd said it aloud. The words felt strange on her tongue, unfamiliar, dangerous, beautiful. Samuel turned to her. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. I love you too, he said, more than I ever thought possible. Clara leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. His arm came around her, pulling her close. What happens now? She asked. Now we live. We work the land. We raise these children. We build something that lasts. It sounds so simple. It is simple. Doesn't mean it's easy. Samuel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. But nothing worth having ever is. Spring came slowly that year, the way it always does in Wyoming territory, grudging, uncertain, then all at once. Clara woke one morning to the sound of birdsong and the smell of thawing earth. She lay still for a moment, listening to Samuel's steady breathing beside her, feeling the warmth of him against her back. This is real, she told herself. This is my life now. She slipped out of bed quietly and padded to the window. Outside, the snow was melting in patches, revealing dark earth underneath. The horses moved lazily in the corral. Somewhere a rooster crowed. Behind her, Samuel stirred. You're up early, he murmured. Couldn't sleep. Clara turned to face him. I was thinking. About what? About how different everything is. She crossed to the bed and sat on the edge. A year ago, I was living in a half-collapsed cabin with a man who barely spoke to me. My children were hungry all the time. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed. Really laughed. Samuel reached out and took her hand. And now, Clara smiled. Now I can't remember the last time I didn't laugh. The children are healthy. Thomas is learning to read again. Mary Ellen's teaching him from your old books. The twins haven't had nightmares in weeks. And Sarah, her voice caught. Sarah calls you Pa now, she finished quietly. The same as Thomas. Like it's the most natural thing in the world. Samuel's eyes glistened. She started last week. I didn't want to say anything in case it stopped. It won't stop. Clara squeezed his hand. You're her father now. In every way that matters. Samuel pulled her down beside him, wrapping his arms around her. I never thought I'd have this again, he said against her hair. After Emily and Lily. I thought that part of my life was over. Thought I was just marking time until I died. And now? Now I'm building something. We're building something. He pulled back to look at her. A family. A future. A legacy that's got nothing to do with names or blood and everything to do with love. Clara kissed him, slow, deep, full of promise. Let's get to work, she said when they finally broke apart. Those fields won't plow themselves. Summer brought hard work and harder blessings. Clara learned the rhythms of the ranch, when to plant and when to harvest, how to read the sky for weather, which of the horses was gentle enough for the children to ride. She worked alongside Samuel every day, her hands growing calloused and strong, her skin tanning under the relentless sun. The children thrived. Thomas shot up 3 inches between May and July, his voice cracking and deepening, his shoulders broadening with new muscle. He worked like a man now, and Samuel treated him like one, with respect, with trust, with the quiet pride of a father watching his son become himself. Mary Ellen recovered fully from the illness that had nearly killed her. She took over the household duties with quiet efficiency, teaching the twins their letters and numbers, keeping the cabin clean and organized. Clara watched her daughter, this serious, capable girl who had grown up too fast, and felt a fierce pride that bordered on reverence. The twins were simply happy. They ran wild through the fields, chasing chickens and catching frogs, their laughter ringing across the valley like bells. They'd forgotten the hard times, the hungry times. This was their childhood now, and it was everything Clara had wanted for them. And Sarah, silent, wounded. Sarah bloomed like a flower after rain. She spoke now. Full sentences, sometimes whole conversations. She followed Samuel everywhere. Her small hand tucked into his large one, chattering about everything she saw. She called him Pa, with easy affection, as if she'd been doing it her whole life. One evening, Clara found them together on the porch. Sarah sat in Samuel's lap, her head against his chest, while he pointed out constellations in the darkening sky. That one's the Big Dipper, Samuel was saying. See how it looks like a ladle? My mama used to say, that's how God scoops up prayers and carries them to heaven. Sarah pointed. What's that one? That's Orion, the hunter. See his belt? Those 3 bright stars in a row. I see them, Sarah bounced excitedly. Is he hunting something? Bears mostly. Maybe a few dragons. There's no such thing as dragons, Pa. Samuel chuckled. How do you know? Because Mama told me. Well, your mama's usually right. He squeezed her gently. But between you and me, I think there might be 1 or 2 dragons left, hiding in the mountains waiting for someone brave enough to find them. Sarah's eyes went wide. Could we find one? Maybe someday, when you're bigger. Clara leaned against the door frame watching them. Her heart ached with a sweetness she'd never known before. This is what happiness feels like, she realized. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of something stronger. Autumn arrived with a letter. Clara found it tucked into the mailbox Samuel had built at the end of the road, a single envelope, cream-colored, addressed in a shaky hand she didn't recognize. She opened it with trembling fingers. Dear Mrs. Thornton, I understand that you have no reason to read this letter, and even less reason to believe what it contains. But I am dying, and there are things I need to say before I go. I was wrong. About you, about Jacob, about everything. My son loved you. He loved your children. He left my house because he wanted to build something different, something better than the cold, ambitious world I raised him in. I didn't understand that then. I understand it now. I have made arrangements with my attorneys. The Whitmore estate, all of it will pass to Jacob's children upon my death. Not because they are Whitmore's, but because they are his. Because he loved them. Because I should have loved them too, and didn't, and will spend whatever time I have left regretting it. I am not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see now what I couldn't see before. You are a good mother. You were a good wife to my son. And the man you've married, Samuel Thornton, is the kind of man I wish I had been. Take care of those children. Let them grow up knowing they are loved. That is all any of us can hope for. Cornelius Whitmore. Clara read the letter 3 times. Her hands shook. Her eyes blurred with tears. When Samuel came in from the fields, she handed it to him without a word. He read it slowly, his face unreadable. When he finished, he set it down on the table and looked at her. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Clara thought about it. Thought about all the pain Cornelius had caused, the fear, the humiliation, the threat to everything she loved. Thought about the man who had tried to take her children and destroy her life. And then she thought about the shaky handwriting, the admission of regret, the words of a dying man trying to make peace with his mistakes. "I want to write back," she said. "I want to tell him that I forgive him." Samuel nodded slowly. "You sure?" "No." Clara laughed a little wetly. "But I'm going to do it anyway, because holding on to anger is like carrying stones in your pocket. Eventually you have to put them down or drown." Samuel crossed to her and took her hands. "You're a remarkable woman, Clara Thornton." "I'm a tired woman who's learned that grudges don't keep you warm at night." She leaned into him. "Besides, if he's really leaving everything to the children, that changes things. For them. For their future. It does. I won't teach them to hate him. I won't pretend he was a good man. But I won't let his shadow darken the rest of their lives either." Samuel pressed a kiss to her forehead. "That's wisdom," he said. "Hard-won wisdom." "That's exhaustion." Clara smiled, but close enough. The letter she sent back was brief. 3 sentences. "I forgive you. I hope you find peace. Your grandchildren will know their father loved them." She never received a reply. 3 weeks later, a telegram arrived from Cornelius's attorney. The judge had died in his sleep peacefully, his affairs in order. The estate, worth more than Clara could comprehend, now belonged to her children. She read the telegram, set it aside, and went back to kneading bread. Some things mattered. Some things didn't. Her children's inheritance would be there when they needed it. For now there was work to do, meals to cook, a family to raise. Winter came again, but this time Clara was ready. The cabin was warm, the larder full, the woodpile stacked high against the wall. The children were healthy and happy, their cheeks round with good food, their laughter ringing through the rooms like music. On Christmas Eve, Samuel brought home a tree, a small pine he'd cut from the hillside, fragrant and green. The children decorated it with ribbons and paper stars, arguing cheerfully over who got to place each ornament. Clara watched from the kitchen doorway, a cup of warm cider in her hands. "You're smiling," Samuel said, coming to stand beside her. "I can't seem to stop." He slipped his arm around her waist. "Good. Don't." "Samuel." "Yeah." Clara turned to look at him. This man who had saved her without asking for anything in return. This man who had loved her children as his own. This man who had taught her that trust was possible, that hope was worth having, that second chances were real. "I'm pregnant," she said. Samuel went completely still. "You're... what, pregnant?" Clara laughed at the look on his face. "I've been fairly certain for about a month now. Wanted to wait until I was sure before I told you." Samuel's eyes went wide, then wider. Then something broke across his face, joy pure and overwhelming, like sun breaking through storm clouds. "We're having a baby," he said, his voice cracked. "You and me. We're having a baby." "We are." He pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. She felt his shoulders shake, felt the wetness of his tears against her hair. "I thought—" His voice was ragged. "After Emily and Lily, I thought I'd never—" "I know." Clara pulled back to look at him. "I know, Samuel. But you will. We will. Together." Samuel cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deep and desperate and full of wonder. "I love you," he said. "God, Clara, I love you so much." "I love you too." They stood there in the doorway wrapped in each other while their children laughed and decorated the tree, and the fire crackled warm in the hearth. Outside, snow was falling soft and white and gentle, covering the world in a blanket of peace. Clara closed her eyes and let herself feel it all. The warmth, the safety, the belonging. A year ago, she had been dying in the snow with nothing but her children and her stubborn will to survive. Now she had everything. Not because someone had saved her, not because luck had finally turned her way, but because she had fought, because she had refused to give up, because she had let herself believe that something better was possible, and then she had built it stone by stone, with her own 2 hands. The baby came in spring, on a morning when the world was bursting with new life. Clara labored through the night, Samuel at her side, holding her hand through every contraction. The children waited in the next room, Thomas keeping the younger ones calm with stories and promises. When the first cry rang out strong and healthy and impossibly beautiful, Clara wept. "It's a girl," the midwife said. "A perfect little girl." Samuel cut the cord with trembling hands. The baby was placed on Clara's chest, warm and wriggling her tiny fists, punching the air. "Hello, little one," Clara whispered. "Hello, my darling." Samuel leaned down, his face wet with tears. "She's beautiful," he said, "just like her mother." "What should we name her?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then, "What about Hope?" Clara looked up at him. "Hope," she repeated. "For everything we've been through. For everything we've become. For the future we're building. Together." Clara smiled through her tears. "Hope Thornton," she said. "It's perfect." The children came in one by one to meet their new sister. Thomas held her with careful reverence. Mary Ellen cried happy tears. The twins wanted to know if they could keep her. And Sarah, sweet. Sarah, who had lost so much and found so much more, climbed onto the bed beside Clara and stared at the baby with wide, wondering eyes. "She's so small," Sarah said. "You were this small once," Clara told her. "All of you were." "Will she be our sister forever?" "Forever and ever." Sarah nodded solemnly. Then she reached out one tiny finger and touched Hope's cheek. "Welcome to the family," she whispered. "We've been waiting for you." That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Clara sat in the rocking chair Samuel had built nursing her newborn daughter. Samuel sat beside her, his hand resting on her knee, his eyes never leaving her face. "You know what I realized?" Clara said softly. "What's that?" "That day in the snow when you found me, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything. I thought there was nothing left to hope for." She looked down at the baby in her arms, at the cabin around her, at the man beside her. "I was wrong," she said. "My life wasn't ending. It was beginning. I just couldn't see it yet." Samuel leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You saved yourself, Clara. I just showed up." "You showed up," Clara agreed. "And that made all the difference." The fire crackled. The baby cooed. Outside, the stars blazed bright and eternal. Clara Whitmore, Thornton, widow, mother, fighter, survivor, closed her eyes and let herself rest. She had walked through fire and come out stronger, She had faced her enemies and won. She had built a life from nothing but courage and stubborn hope. And now, surrounded by the family she had fought for and the love she had earned, she finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, not a building, not even a person. Home was the knowledge that she was worthy of love, that she was strong enough to survive, that no matter what storms came, she would face them standing, and she would not face them alone. Clara opened her eyes and looked at Samuel. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For stopping that day, for seeing me, for believing I was worth saving." Samuel smiled, that slow, rare smile that still made her heart flutter. "You were always worth saving, Clara. You just needed someone to remind you." She reached out and took his hand. And in that moment, holding her newborn daughter with her husband beside her and her children sleeping safe in the next room, Clara knew with absolute certainty that everything she had suffered, everything she had lost, everything she had survived, it had all been leading here. To this cabin, to this family, to this life, to love. The story was complete. The journey was over. And Clara Whitmore Thornton lived, not just survived, but lived happily ever after.